Welcome back, and thank you for taking the time to complete the quiz. I hope it's got your heads into gear. That was the point after all. But now let's look at the answers. So the first question was a true or false that mental disorders are more difficult to treat than physical health problems. Well, let me ask you a question. Would you prefer to have an anxiety disorder that, with some work from you as well as from us, we could treat and get you over within 6 to 8 weeks? Or would you rather have an incurable cancer? Would you prefer epilepsy to depression? Or would you prefer a common cold to schizophrenia? You see, there are things in both physical and mental health fields that are difficult to treat, and there are some that are relatively straightforward. It's not about physical or mental. And I really need you to remember that, because so many people seem to think that mental disorder is a great mystery and we don't understand what we're doing and therefore we can't get recovery. And that's just not true. Now, it is true that it's only 2021, and it's also true that we don't know everything. Maybe in 1,000 years we'll have an awful lot more answers than we have now. But today we know a great deal more than most people believe. And we can use that knowledge to treat both physical and mental disorders with varying degrees of success. So it's false. True or false? People who hear voices are mentally ill. Well, this is an interesting one, and certainly it's true that the people we meet, people with diagnoses like schizophrenia, for example, or other psychotic disorders, very definitely are unwell, are ill, and often incredibly distressed. I'm not going to patronise anyone by pretending that that's not the case. In fact, I spend my life working with people who have a range of mental disorders, including those who hear voices, who don't know how to cope with them, and as a result have very, very difficult lives. But they're not all voice hearers. Professor Marius Rom and his partner Sandra Escher in Holland started some research in the 1980s that actually is still repeated from time to time, that demonstrates that around 12 to 15% of industrialized Western populations hear voices. But only up to 3% of them have any real problems with those voices. The rest either cope very well in spite of their voices, or very often because of them. Psychic mediums, for example, they've definitely found a place in society, and it would be wrong to call them distressed. Some religious people. There are all sorts of voice hearers who we never meet. And that's another thing that I want you to bear in mind. It's something known as the clinician's illusion. It's the belief that the distress that we see is all there is. But that's just not true. Many people hear voices and have absolutely no difficulty. It's worth bearing that in mind, because when we meet the people who are distressed and who do have diagnosable disorders, if we can learn, and I'll talk to you about this later, if we can learn what the main differences are between the distressed and the not distressed voice hearers, we can help the people we work with to change their attitude toward their voices. We can help them to get some relief. So again, the answer, I'm afraid, is false, but sometimes true. Schizophrenia is caused by bad parenting, true or false? It's false. That's in there because for a long time, it was believed that it was the case, and some people still carry that guilt, particularly the parents of schizophrenia diagnosed people themselves. I've met more than one mother who's taken on the concept of what used to be called the schizophrenogenic mother and feels incredibly guilty at their sons' or daughters' problems. It's just not true. There are many complex reasons for schizophrenia, some genetic, some social, some psychological, many reasons why people end up diagnosed with schizophrenia. But bad parenting is not a simple answer to the question of what's the cause. Sorry, it's not that simple. Depression is a normal human experience. Well, that depends upon what you mean by normal. If you mean healthy or desirable, then no, it's not. But if you mean statistically significant, yes, it is. The incidence of depression in our societies is increasing year on year. There are many more depressed people than there are people with red hair, for example. But nobody would say that red hair is abnormal. So it depends what you mean. The point here is that depression is a very real illness. It's different from the everyday sadness that we all feel. It's not normal mood fluctuation in that sense. But it is normal insofar as many, many people experience depression. Our task, of course, is partly to understand the difference between depression and sadness, and partly to know what to do when we meet depressed people, and we'll talk about that later on too. This is still just picture on the box overview. We're giving you the picture, we'll give you the pieces later. Alcohol causes depression. Yes, I'm afraid it does. Alcohol is a depressant. It destroys a brain chemical called serotonin. And serotonin seems very, very likely to be significant in maintaining good mood. So yes, alcohol causes depression. Now some of you will be sat there thinking, oh, I don't believe that, I drink like a fish and I'm not depressed. And yes, that's true. There are people who drink huge amounts of alcohol and never become depressed. That's because their tolerances are different. You see, different people have limits, different limits, to how much of a substance they can handle, or indeed how much of anything they can handle before they start to develop problems. We'll talk more about that when we cover the stress and vulnerability model of mental health and disorder. But for now, I just want you to remember that what is good for the goose isn't necessarily good for the gander. We're all different, we all have different needs, and we all have different limits. What does symptom mean? Well, what did you think? The answer is very simple. A symptom is something which is caused by an illness, by a disorder or a disease. It's not necessarily obvious. That's why we talk about signs and symptoms. Signs are the things that we can observe, we can see, we can detect. Symptoms are the things that are caused by the disease, and they may not be obvious. Think about in physical health, for example. Very often people have symptoms of cancer. They have a tumour that's growing inside them, but they know nothing about it for some time. So it's not always obvious, but a symptom is a thing that is caused by the disease process. So which of these are symptoms of depression? We have sleeplessness. Well, yes. People who are depressed can either sleep too much or too little. Dietary disturbance, that's the same. Delusions. Yes. I will define delusions later. For now I'm just going to call them odd ideas, but people have odd ideas when they're depressed, certainly. Delusions of guilt, for example, is a very common one. Or delusions of worthlessness or of impending doom. That's often more linked to anxiety, but it arrives in depression as well. A history of childhood abuse. Well, if you said yes, I'm afraid you're wrong. You see, history isn't a symptom of anything, it's just history. The point here is that people get over things. Now, they don't always, and a history of childhood abuse may create symptoms that would end up being lumped together as post-traumatic stress disorder. For example, there are a host of symptoms that can arise as a result of childhood sexual abuse, but the abuse itself isn't a symptom. It's just history. The reason I want you to remember that is because it's easy to jump to conclusions. Don't do that. The symptom is what you see. The history is something that people may very well have got past. Panic attacks. Well, this shouldn't be so, as we'll see very shortly. If depression is a physiological depression, so physically in your body everything slows down, your thoughts slow down, your movements slow down, you lose motivation. Anxiety is the opposite, everything speeds up, your thoughts get fleeting and you get the thing called flight of ideas, where you can't focus on anything for any length of time because the next idea pops into your head and your speech gets increased and everything's fast and you feel that you have to do something. They're almost polar opposites. They shouldn't be put together, except there is a thing called agitated depression, where we have anxiety and depression at the same time. We'll talk about agitated depression, I'm sure, at some point in this program. It's an interesting phenomenon, but on the whole, depression means everything slows down, and anxiety means everything speeds up. So they are different, but just occasionally they're the same. Confused? We'll get beyond that. And the final one is overactive or manic behaviour. Now, some people, I'm sure, will have said yes because they'll have heard of manic depression. But it's not something that happens, or two things that happen at the same time. Mania is when your mood is very, very high. Most of us have a normal mood fluctuation. We get a bit happy, sometimes we even get joyful, and we get a bit sad. Sometimes we even just sort of touch on the depression, but never go there. And then there are people who get much, much higher in their mood until they can't sleep, they can't think properly, they may get delusional. We talked about delusions in depression. In mania you can get delusional. You can get grandiose delusions where you think that you're the king of the world, or that you're a multi-millionaire, or you think you can do anything. And then that's the manic phase. The depressive phase is different. The depressive phase is just straight depression, so everything slows down. If you have delusions, they're about being worthless rather than being the king of the world. They are opposite extremes. Manic depression, as it used to be, is now called bipolar affective disorder. Affective just means related to mood. And bipolar, two poles, think of the North Pole and the South Pole. And a person who has bipolar affective disorder, their mood goes between the two. But it's never both at the same time. That's just not possible. And the final question, what is psychosis? What does that mean? Well, first of all, let me tell you that it doesn't mean axe-wielding murderer. That's just the nonsense that you read in the Daily Mail. They often confuse the word psychotic with psychopathic. Actually, psychosis is a collection of 3 different types of symptom, what we call Kurt Schneider's first-rank symptoms, and they are hallucinations, delusions, and thought disorders. Hallucinations are experiences in any sense, so that's sight, sound or hearing, touch, taste or smell, that people experience but that aren't actually present in the world. Delusions, well, they're known as fixed, false beliefs not amenable to reason. To put it another way, they're things that people believe, really believe, that won't easily be shifted, but that aren't based upon any form of reason or rational thought or reality itself. And then the final one is the thought disorder. Now that's not a problem with what people think, like a delusion, rather it's a problem with how people think, with how their thoughts are put together. So they may find the world very confusing, or they may think that everything is perfectly normal, but when they try to explain things, it just comes out as a confusing mishmash of words that aren't in order, or of new words that they've made up but that they think are real. There are all sorts of types of thought disorder, but they're all a problem not with what people think, but with the way people think. So, if you have hallucinations, or delusions, or thought disorders, you have psychosis. Now please understand, I'm going to say it again. None of these symptoms necessarily mean violence, or aggression, or axe-wielding murderer. So, there we are. Those are the answers to your 8 questions, and in giving you those answers, I hope that I've started to create a proper picture on this box of mental disorder. You'll begin to see those differences. We'll flesh those out as we continue through the course, and by the end of today, all of your confusion should have gone.